In this video, we will
I don't know if they'll do announcements today because the PA has been kind of broken, so they might or they might not, so they might get interrupted. But I want to get started. I have been grading probably not as much as I'd like, but as much as I can because the schedule sucks for teachers for grading because we're teaching for like 5 hours and then we're like planning all the stuff we have to put up online. And anyway, it just leaves very little time for grading. But I have started. I'm almost finished with the rhetorical triangle exams, but I wanted to talk to you about how to access the feedback on Canvas because nothing is worse than as a teacher providing feedback and then people being like, oh, I didn't even know, and it's like I just wasted hours of my life saying things that you will never read, right? So what is the point? This is a very boring and yet informational video about how to do that on Canvas because I think some of you may not know how to find that. I'm just gonna go with that. So, we don't have turnitin.com on our Canvas stuff, but but everything else pretty much looks the same on your end with like different colors.
We will review how students can view an assignment submission feedback, including comments and annotations made by the instructor. To begin, log into Canvas and navigate to your course. In course navigation, click the grades link. Find the assignment that you want to view feedback about and click the assignment name. The submission details page includes the basics of the assignment, including assignment name and submission date. The submission window displays the actual submission. However, if you submitted the assignment with a file upload, the file will appear as an attachment. If the assignment used Turnitin, you will see your Turnitin originality score. If you click on the Turnitin score, you can see additional details and instructor comments. You can preview your submission by clicking the Preview or View Feedback button. If a grade has been assigned, at the top of the sidebar you can view the grade. If your assignment was graded using a rubric, you can view the rubric and see what scores you received for each criterion. To view the
I
rubric,
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are you planning on taking the same feedback this year? Sign-ups are September 21st through October 30th. Go to the financial office to pay for and reserve your AP test.
October 5th through 9th is our homecoming week. Our event at the end of the week will be a homecoming movie on the field. We will be hosting a movie on the football field on Friday, October 9th. Get a date or come with a friend. Seating will be in pairs and socially distanced. Masks are to be worn the entire event. More information on tickets soon.
If you need technology assistance with Canvas, please only contact our district technology department at homesupport@provo.edu.
We we're going to be having a Yell Your Year competition between the grades leading up to homecoming. Next week on our grade canvas, a Zoom meeting link will go out to each grade. On Friday, September 25th, each grade will meet in their Zoom meeting to yell their year. The grade with the most attendees will win points for their grade. Make sure to wear your grade color. Freshmen is orange, sophomores blue, juniors are white, and seniors are black. And help your grade win points towards your homecoming spirit competition between grades.
Good luck to our sports teams this week. Today we have good luck to our freshman soccer team against Maple Mountain.
If students want to sign up for a book club or the name of that book committee, please come to the library and talk to Mrs. G, the new librarian.
Breakfast and lunch is now free for all students until December. Today's lunch is pizza, ripper pepperoni, broccoli, cauliflower, ranch dressing, peaches, chocolate chip cookie, and variety of milks.
Today is picture retakes. You will be called down based on your last name, even if you're not purchasing pictures. Be sure to have your picture taken for the yearbook.
Students D through F should go down to the auditorium for pictures now.
Thanks, Timothy. Have a great day.
Okay, back to our video.
Frick, click the Show Rubric link. Any instructor comments added to your submission, as well as any comments added by you, appear in the comments portion of the sidebar. If you see the View Feedback link, you make additional annotated comments for your submission. Click on View Feedback. You will see a preview of your submission along with annotated comments from your instructor. To download your submission with annotated comments, click on the download button in the toolbar. When you're done viewing your submission, click on the close button.
Okay, so basically ours looks the same. For the rhetorical triangle exam, I tried to do the annotated feedback that allows me to put like these little marker things where in your exam I'm talking about and then tell you like the comment on it. Sometimes if it's like, I won't make comments on every assignment because like your annotations, you don't need that, that's just dumb. But if I have like holistic comments like, hey, this is like half as long as it should be, I can just put that here and stuff. But if you want to see on here where I'm like, okay, this piece of evidence is not actually proving what you say it is, or like, sometimes be like, this part is excellent, right? Like, that's nice comments. You can see those annotated there, okay? I probably won't upload a ton of rubrics and stuff, but if I did, you can push on that button and see kind of where on the rubric it is. Any questions on viewing feedback? Okay, cool. So when you get a grade and you're like, why the crap is that? Look for feedback first, then go to me. That will go a lot faster. And you can do this in any of your classes. Okay, so today we're going to walk through Fish Cheeks and Champion of the World. You should have annotated them at home, but we talked through them as a class to make sure you're seeing everything you need to see, and for you to get a chance to discuss with other people, because close reading and thinking while you're reading through an excerpt are going to be the most helpful things for you when you go to write the essay, and having something to say about it, right? And as we read through, and people are like, oh, I recognize this, then you can be like, oh, that's something that I should be looking for too, and that I can add to my rhetorical toolbox and then use to talk about on the essay, okay? So go ahead and pull up Fish Cheeks first. The story of teenage love and embarrassment, okay? All right, so I'm gonna read through. I want you to be thinking about, okay, what is the purpose of this piece? Like, what does the author have to make us feel in order for this piece to work? And then what choices does she make to accomplish that? Okay, and remember when you're writing an analytical essay on the exam, no matter how they phrase it, it's gonna be like if you boil it down, it's always what is the purpose of the piece and what particular choices does that author make in order to accomplish it, okay? So I'll read through, then you'll chat, then we'll talk. We'll just keep doing that. I fell in love with the minister's son the winter I turned 14. That was like a great opening line, right? Nostalgia for your teenage He was not Chinese, but as white as Mary in the manger. For Christmas, I prayed for this blonde-haired boy, Robert, and a slim new American nose. When I found out that my parents had invited the minister's family over for Christmas Eve dinner, I cried. What would Robert think of our shabby Chinese Christmas? What would he think of our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners? What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey, but sweet potatoes and sweet potatoes. Okay, let me start over. What terrible disappointment would he feel upon seeing not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese food? I completely butchered that question. Okay, on Christmas Eve, I saw that my mother had outdone herself in creating a strange menu. She was pulling back black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. The kitchen was littered with appalling mounds of raw food. A slimy rock cod was bulging eyes that pleaded not to be thrown into a pan of hot oil. Tofu, which looked like stacked wedges of rubbery white sponges. A bowl soaking dried fungus back to life. A plate of squid, their backs crisscrossed with knife markings so they resembled bicycle tires. Okay, talk to someone next to you. What do you notice going on in here?
The author is complaining about all this food. And right off the bat, I think it's the whole point about it is something about her not liking her.
I heard it about dying. No, I thought it did. I went to bed at like 1.
Like,
But I woke up and it was something
a
about
lot of
like
negative words.
Greek.
I haven't
Not good. Wait, what is this?
Yes.
I tried so much.
That's just really relative. And if the food is like slimy, appalling, she does not seem to like it.
Alright, what do we notice going on in these paragraphs? What are some things we should know? Yes.
So there's a lot of imagery in it, and it's portraying how the narrator is like embarrassed of their almost like Christmas traditions.
Okay. Yeah. What kind of words does she use to describe their Chinese traditions? Yes.
She uses very negative words.
Yeah.
Terrible disappointment and appalling.
Yes, right? Even like the where is that? I'm sorry.
Just terrible disappointments in the second paragraph.
Oh, yes, right there. Right, yeah, terrible disappointment, right? Our noisy Chinese relatives who lacked proper American manners. What about the food? What does that look like? Does that sound appetizing to you? Black veins out of the backs of fleshy prawns. Appalling mounds, like you said, appalling mounds of food. Slimy rock cod, bulging eyes, rubbery white sponges. Nothing sounds yummier than that, right? Dried fungus. Like, could you have said that in a different way, right? Okay, so we see, yes, lots of disgusting things about their own normal Christmas traditions. We're assuming that this is kind of normal. What else do you guys notice going on? Yes, Hannah.
There's a lot of heavy emphasis on Chinese, like she repeats it a lot in the second paragraph, and like kind of making it seem inferior.
Yeah, right, Chinese. She says that word like a ton of times, right? And then Christmas. But definitely that repetition of Chinese, and you're saying that she doesn't view it very positively, right? We've got noisy Chinese relatives. And then what is proper? The American manners, right? Christmas Eve dinner, shabby Chinese Christmas, not a roasted turkey and sweet potatoes, but Chinese, right? So like, definitely that dichotomy there. Yes?
How do you annotate?
How do you annotate? Did you open up the Google Doc? Okay, so then you can go up here to this highlight button, and if you go like this over it, and you push this, you can pick whatever color your heart desires, and then it will turn it that color. And then you can also put a comment by either pushing here, or if you right click here, you can put comment, or there's this button here, and then you can say this shows blah blah blah. Smart. Okay. Cool. Good question. other things you notice going on in this first little bit? So we talked about some imagery, we talked about some diction. What are the other parts of a rhetorical toolbox? We've got details, sentence structure. Do you notice any sentence structure stuff that looks like a pattern? Yes, Hannah?
She's constantly like asking questions.
Yes, we've got like question, right? So you almost get like that teenage angst, like, oh my gosh, what is he gonna see? What is he gonna think? I am freaking out. Autumn?
No, I just gonna be like, it's kind of repeat, but like the questions are like show her anxiety, give like the readers kind of that anxiety too. It really
Yeah.
like puts you in that emotion and like kind of connects that emotional response of like, oh gosh, like this is sus.
Yeah, right? And then that next paragraph is terrible, like all of this stuff. Whose eyes is she seeing these food plates through? Because this is her normal Christmas, right? So she's seen this food before, and yet she's freaking out. So whose view is she using here? Yes?
Americans.
The Americans, right? Her love, Robert. She's seeing this stuff through his eyes, and all of a sudden it looks gross and strange, and she's freaking out. Okay, good. Okay, and then they arrived. The minister's family and all my relatives in a clamor of doorbells and rumbled Christmas packages. Robert grunted hello, and I pretended he was not worthy of existence, because that's, you know, how you treated your crushes when you were little. That was the best way for them to know you loved them. Dinner threw me deeper into despair. My relatives licked the ends of their chopsticks and reached across the table, dipping them into a dozen or so plates of food. Robert and his family waited patiently for platters to be passed to them. My relatives murmured with pleasure when my mother brought out the whole steamed fish. Robert grimaced. Then my father poked his chopsticks just below the fish eye and plucked out the soft meat. Amy, your favorite, he said, offering me the tender fish cheek. I wanted to disappear. At the end of the meal, my father leaned back and belched loudly, thanking my mother for her fine cooking. It's a polite Chinese custom to show you are satisfied, explained my father to our astonished guest. Robert was looking down at his plate with a reddened face. The minister managed to muster up a quiet burp. I was stunned into silence for the rest of the night. You talk to your neighbor. What do you notice? What patterns are going on?
Okay.
What do they do?
One pattern I noticed is that while the family all enjoys the meal, the minister and Robert don't like it so much.
What did you say?
Yeah. Exactly. Read.
I don't really understand that last sentence. Why was she studying in silence? Which was it? Was it that the minister burped, or was it that her father burped?
So she finds out that it's not a bad
I'm just not sure on that.
So I guess she.
Okay, what do we notice going on here? What are some things we should note? Some tools that she's using. Nathan, what's something that you noticed going on in these paragraphs?
Well, it seemed like the minister's family, like, the author tried to make it look like they were embarrassed.
Okay. What makes you think that? Like what particular part?
Well, they just sat there a lot, like, waiting for the food to be passed around, just, like, observing all this reaching across and stuff.
Okay. There is a big difference between how her family behaves and then the minister's family. What else do you notice about the differences there? Yeah.
Well, this is actually not related to that.
Okay, that's fine.
So, almost all the sentences in that paragraph have about the same length. But there's two sentences that stand out. Robert grimaced and I want you to disappear. And I think those are really short because the author wants to emphasize those points.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Like these little moments are happening. Why would that be? What does that do for that moment? Like, why do we want to notice that more than the others?
Cause the others, you kind of just like move your eyes over, but don't read all of them. These ones are short.
Okay, so like you see the mortification on both her face and Robert. And really, Robert is kind of a loser, right? He just like grimaces and grunts, like that's what he's doing, right? Not really involved in the story. So I don't even know why she has a crush on him, really. But we can't control love, right? We love who we love. Okay, what else do you notice about the different ways that the family, the Chinese family, is portrayed versus their guests? Do you notice any differences? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well, it seems like the Chinese family doesn't seem to have as much manners, or like American manners as the minister's family does, as they're waiting. It says like they're waiting patiently for platters to be passed to them, whereas like her family's just reaching across the table, dipping and everything, and just licking everything.
Totally. Yeah.
It kind of shows how her family's just like genuinely not ashamed of who they are. They're like, yo, it's Christmas, we're all like gonna vibe, like we're ready to eat this food, we're having a great time. And they're like not even stressed about it, 'cause they just are like, cool, it's just normal to them. Like they're not like, oh, I wonder what this family's thinking about us. They're like, oh, we're having a great time.
Yeah, totally. There's like this comfort level for the Chinese. The other people are not sure what culturally they should be doing, right? They've licked the ends of their chopsticks and are reaching, whereas then the family, the next sentence, waiting patiently for platters to be passed to them. Mine murmured with pleasure, brought up the fish, he's grimacing, and then this eye, he's like, and she's like, oh my gosh, right? So we're seeing, like the family's like, I don't even care, right? And that's important because so far, what do you think her purpose is in writing this piece? Yeah.
I think it's to show that she like accepted her culture despite doubts.
Okay, but definitely there's like that cultural element to it, right? Like this idea that like accepting who you are in the face of what other people might think, right? And we're getting that because she's definitely setting up this huge divide between what she perceives of as normal American culture and then her Chinese culture and trying to navigate the space between those two. So that would be important to be setting up these huge differences in the proper manners, waiting patiently versus the licking the chopsticks and like the burping, right? How mortified is she when her father burps and then the Chinese, or not the Chinese minister, the American minister tries to emulate that cultural thing. She's just like, I'm done, right? She's stunned into silence for the rest of the night. I love this thing. I just think it's so funny. Okay, let's finish it up. So, after everyone had gone, my mother said to me, you want to be the same as American girls on the outside. She handed me an early gift. It was a mini skirt in beige tweed, but inside, you must always be Chinese. You must be proud you are different. Your only shame is to have shame. And even though I didn't agree with her then, I knew that she understood how much I had suffered during the evening's dinner. It wasn't until many years later, long after I had gotten over my crush on Robert, that I was able to fully appreciate her lesson and the true purpose behind our particular menu. For Christmas Eve that year, she had chosen all my favorite foods. Okay, turn to each other and discuss those last two paragraphs. What do you notice with the others?
Fish cheeks. She was just like
all the food that's out there. And the way that she was worried because she did it in the moment.
It's like this.
Her mom's like, you are the same as my mom. And I was like,
You always have to wait this
she doesn't like her Jewish husband. She ends up like realizing why it's true.
What's ending? This guy told me to like, this is so real, I can't believe it. And at the end, she's like, you have to see this. Like, bro, what? Twist
I think
ending?
one thing that's repeated more than once, I guess, is that it took her time to
That's why
agree with her mother. What do you think that means, that her mother had chosen all her favorite foods? I think that's just like a casual comment. I think the food represents something.
Okay. What do you guys think? What do you notice? What should we notice in these last two paragraphs to help us in our analysis? Sydney, what's something that you noticed? I even say? Yeah, help her out, Lucy. What did you guys talk about?
Well, I just said because she was like so embarrassed when she had other people coming into her house, like how they did stuff. So then she realized like why tradition was a thing, and then she like got over that, like other people's judgments. So then she realized how much she enjoyed it.
Okay, but it wasn't until a lot later, right?
Yeah.
That last line, I think, is particularly ironic because the whole piece, she talks about her stuff as like the worst ever, right? Like her traditions, her culture, the food is disgusting, she's embarrassed, and yet, for Christmas Eve that year, her mother had chosen all of her favorite foods. Why is that like, I mean, that's like super ironic, right? So like, we don't know that as readers that these are all her favorites. To us, we're kind of viewing it through Robert's lens because that's what she's presenting to us. But that would be important to her purpose because again, her purpose has to do with the idea that you shouldn't have shame in your culture, that you should appreciate your culture and that you should be proud of it, right? And the process of a teenager learning that skill. And so that line right there is super important to the purpose of this piece because without it, we're just like, oh, she's like ashamed of her culture. But setting up that irony, it kind of like, at the end, I'm like, ugh, that like, you know, I would feel bad because like your parents are trying to do something nice for you and yet the whole time you're just like, ew, I'm grossed out, I'm embarrassed. And that kind of feels sad to a parent, right? They've got all this effort for you and you're just a snotty teenager. And so that really sets up, just like that guilt you would feel like thinking about, oh, my parents did this nice thing and yet I was a total snot. And so helping her in that process of accepting her culture and not having shame in it, even though it's different than what Main Street culture is where she's living, right? Anything else you guys want to say about these last few paragraphs? Yeah, I like this piece. I think it's funny. But if I was going to write an essay, some things I would highlight to talk about the idea that, you know, people should not be ashamed of their culture, that they should accept it. I would definitely talk about this last line.
Attention teachers and students, part of the interruption. Anyone who is part of the alphabet A through F and has not yet had their retake done, if that's necessary, please head to the foyer now, as well as students G through I. Thank you.
Okay, so I would definitely talk about the difference in diction and imagery that she's using to describe mainstream American culture and then her Chinese culture. So like, okay, she calls, you know, all the food rubbery whites and just things that create that feeling of disgust, right? And then American stuff, which is very bland, but also like positive, like proper. She calls him white as Mary in the manger, right? So alluding to like Christianity and kind of a sense of normalness. Yeah.
That sentence just doesn't make sense to me. Like, Mary wasn't the one in the manger, so.
Maybe it also shows her confusion, right? Because she's Chinese, so maybe she doesn't really understand that we would normally, as Americans, put Jesus in the manger, right? I mean, she was like next to the manger, but yeah, I think that also kind of shows that she doesn't really know what's going on, even though she thinks of American culture as like, that's normal, I should want to be that, and yet she doesn't really fully understand it either. So it's just kind of funny. I never thought about that, but that's funny. Funny. I don't know. Okay. So I can talk about that juxtaposition between here's like American culture and then the noisy, terrible, disappoint, all of those like different words creating that conflict there. You could talk about how to make this piece work, she has to portray it through Robert's eyes and show how she does that, right? This menu that is actually her favorite is actually, she describes it as if Robert were seeing it, right? And talk about all he really does in the story is grunt and grimace and have a reddened face, right? Yeah, I think that's what I would go with. Okay, any other questions on fish cheeks there? If you're done with that, you can turn it in, but remember when you're annotating, you're not just highlighting, but you're making those comments too. So if you haven't made the comments yet, wait before submitting it and then turn it in when you're done, okay? Let's go to Champion of the World, okay? This one's by Maya Angelou. It's from her book. I I know why the caged bird stings. But this is a small scene in that book. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing. I'll read through. You'll talk about what you notice, and we'll talk about how her choices are contributing to purpose, okay? The last inch of space was filled, yet people continued to wedge themselves along the walls of the store. Uncle Willie had turned the radio up to its last notch so that the youngsters on the porch wouldn't miss a word. Women sat on the kitchen chairs, dining room chairs, stools, and upturned wooden boxes. Small children and babies were perched on every lap available and then leaned on the shelves or on each other. The apprehensive mood was shot through with shafts of gaiety as a black sky is streaked with lightning. I ain't worried about this fight. Joe's gonna whip that cracker like it's open season. He gonna whip him till that white boy call him mama. At last, the talking finished, and the string-along songs and razor blades were over, and the fight began. Okay, talk to your neighbor. What you notice going on here, what should we take note of?
I noticed the use of language there is a certain dialect of American English. It sounds like it's letter, so
There's gonna be a fight.
It's more of like when
Honestly, also this kind of seems over dramatic. Not maybe over dramatic, definitely. Black history.
Maybe I'll do it if you like it.
If I didn't know that this was
Yeah.
not a biography, I think it's it's not a biography, yeah. When I read through it for that first time, I thought this is Edward fiction, and no, it's not a biography.
Yeah, like they really highlight that, and as opposed to saying like the walls, you know? And so it kind of gives you insight to the time frame and like the author's standpoint.
I think it's an autobiography with a lot of interpretation of details, and maybe made up details.
Mine is doing so not autobiography, right?
Right.
She'll then highlight what she wants.
Yeah.
All right, what do you guys notice? What are some things we should take note of? Yeah, Joseph.
There's certain kind of language used.
Okay, what do we call that? Do you know what we call when they dialect, right? And why do you think she's using dialect?
Well, to show us that these people are black.
Okay, and how do you know they're black based on that?
Because that's like in the movies and everything, how they have black people speak a lot of things.
Plus, they call people, like, it's gonna whip that white boy, right, that cracker, like, that's usually what you refer to white people as. So this shows, you know, their race. And she's putting that in early because this story, one of the main things it's gonna be talking about is race, right? So that would help to emphasize that even from the beginning. What else do we notice going on that we should notice in this paragraph? Adam?
So like, it's kind of a small thing, but the author seems kind of older because, like, they're talking about like the youngsters on the porch, you know, and that tries to kind of make me seem like, oh, I'm like an older person making, you know, or like even reflecting back on the experience, like saying like, oh, well, the kids are here, and like the way she describes the room is really crazy because like talking about how everything is like super cramped and more people are coming. It kind of adds to the importance of this event that's gonna happen.
Okay, good. I like how you said that. So like, this first part is saying of how important this event is, because one, everyone is cramming in there, right? Every available inch, it says, is like filled up with people. The youngsters, right? So if they're saying they're youngsters, then obviously the people saying that are older, and so this is not just like a little kid thing. These adults are very invested in what's going on, but so are the kids. So it's like this whole community affair, right? Anything else we notice? Yeah.
There seemed to be some details that she couldn't really remember, and maybe like a little embellished the story.
Okay. And yeah, when we're looking at like memoir particularly, usually, you know, you gotta think, okay, the author has a purpose, they're trying to convey something, so they may embellish with that purpose in mind, right? To better
Right.
convey that. But what do you think that she's adding that are embellished?
Well, not in this paragraph, but like in a couple down. It says one of the listeners cackled like an hen and was quieted. I just don't know if like I would remember that kind of think so many years into the future.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe she remembers people like laughing, but maybe she's also just kind of creating this atmosphere that she definitely felt, but
Right.
maybe doesn't remember word for word.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, I was kind of confused about this actually, because like it's talking about how like that was kind of quieted, and so I don't know if that's trying to show that like, hey, there's kind of almost this like quiet reverence of this like huge event, but then later it talks about how like they're all murmuring and like talking about it, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. So I don't, is that like just showing that okay, it starts like super quiet and like, but as people get more and more into it, like they aren't able to contain themselves as much.
Okay, yeah.
Like I don't know if that's it.
I think we'll see more, like, I think you'll understand it better as we read, but pay attention to when they're quiet and when they're loud, and I think that will help you answer that question. So I'm gonna answer it for you right now, and see if you can do it, and then we'll talk about it. Did you wanna add something, Lou? Okay. Good. Okay, so they finished talking. Right now they're kind of murmuring, and it says that also that the radio had turned up to its last notch, meaning the radio is very loud right now, right? Okay, so lots of sound. Okay. Let's see here. A quick jab to the head. In the store, the crowd grunted. A left to the head, and a right, and another left. One of the listeners cackled, like a hen, and was quieted. They're in a clinch. Lewis is trying to fight his way out. Some bitter comedian on the porch said, "That white man don't mind hugging that person now, I betcha." The referee is moving in to break them up, but Lewis finally pushed the contender away, and it's an uppercut to the chin. The contender is hanging on. Now he's backing away. Lewis catches him with a short left to the jaw. A tide of murmuring assent poured out the door and into the yard. Another left, and another left. Lewis is saving that mighty right. The mutter in the crowd, or in the store, had grown into a baby roar and was pierced by the clang of a bell and the announcers, "That's the bell for round 3, ladies and gentlemen." As I pushed my way to the store, I wondered if the announcer gave any thought to the fact that he was addressing, as ladies and gentlemen, all the Negroes around the world who sat sweating and praying, glued to their master's voice. Okay, talk. What do you guys notice going on?
One pattern I noticed is when Lewis is doing well, the crowd gets louder.
It sounds like some
Doing
people are,
poorly, it's quiet.
there's like a big split. So I got
That kind of gives more
I also
insight.
noticed that you often brought up some racial tension again. Pointing to perhaps
No, it's not.
about
It's a fight?
the
I was like,
whites, presumably whites, addressing black ladies and trying to make some kind of irony there, which maybe it's ironic, but maybe it's not.
You know, that's what I'm
Okay, what do you guys notice? What should we note? Wes, what's something you noticed in that part?
I'm sorry, I've been reading somewhere else, so I don't really.
Okay. Anissa, what's something that you noticed?
We just talked about when it says he was addressing as ladies and gentlemen, so they probably weren't used to getting that kind of respect.
Yeah.
So it was different.
Yeah, it's kind of something to know, right? They're like, ladies and gentlemen, and yet, like, at least probably half of the people listening are black, right? Would they get that kind of treatment in normal life? No.
Maybe probably not.
Probably, definitely not, right? And so, kind of just, I don't know if that's like necessarily like irony, but definitely not normal for them, right? Where they're like, oh, like, ha ha ha, like he doesn't even know that he's being kind where he would normally be rude, showing that disparity in how they're treated. And that's gonna come into play at the end, that difference in how they are treated than their white counterparts in a normal life. What else do you guys notice in this part? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, that's great.
Like, it always says the contender and Lewis,
Uh-huh.
never says like the contender's name, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like, why would you not say another man's name in the fight, you know? And that kind of shows us like what's actually going on, and like more of the time period kind of gives us like roughly like what kind of is going on socially at the time as well.
Yeah. Kind of interesting, and remember, this is her memoir, right? And so, like Joseph pointed out, she is remembering what she wants to and putting in there stuff, maybe even if it's not entirely how she remembered it, to create a purpose, right? And so in this, she's saying Lewis, which is the black man fighting, and then the contender. Why would you not name, like, why does it not matter what his name is? Yeah.
The contender represents all white people in this way, and when he's beating up Lewis later on, it's like white people beating up black people.
Yeah, right, so it's like, it doesn't really matter who this white guy is, he's just like another white guy, but Lewis matters, because, this fight is more than a fight, right? Think about like sports fans, they're psychotic, right? You might be saying like, I'll sit there with my grandpa and all of a sudden he's using like profanity and you're like, whoa, I didn't even know you knew that word, grandpa, like what is happening? They take like nice, normal people and make them psychotic, right? So she has to prove in writing this story that this fight is more than just like a normal sporting event where people are already psycho. And so some of the things that she's doing to do that is she doesn't say what the contender's name is. She will later, but like in this beginning, she says contender a ton of times when she could be switching that up, leaving that out and showing that Lewis is different, and that he represents more. The idea that they're all in there and they're wedged in there, and it's not just the adults or the kids, it's the whole group of people, right? Waiting and listening to that radio, almost like a lifeline. Did we already read that part? Okay, this part, their master's voice. Why that phrasing? Why the master's voice? Yeah.
So this is definitely still like racist, I guess, America. And so saying like their master's voice shows like how much attention they're paying to, and like that's kind of like I don't know how to phrase it, but it's kind of like the negative way of putting it, how attentive they are.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
It's referring back to like slavery almost.
Yeah, definitely. You could say that like they're glued to their master's voice. In this case, who's their master? Who's controlling their actions? Like that radio and that announcer, right? Yes.
So I think she also capitalizes the M here to imply a Christian.
Yes, that too. So that's the other thing, is that M for like capitalized there, an allusion to Christ, right? The master of the human race. What did Christ do for humanity, according to Christianity? He saved us from ourselves, right? He saved us from sin, makes it so we can live again, right? And in this way, Lewis is representative of Christ. If they're all watching this master, like, can he save our race, right, by winning this fight? And definitely, again, goes with that purpose of making this more than just a sporting event, but representative of something much greater. Anything else? Questions or anything? Okay, I'm gonna keep reading. It's so exciting. You can feel the tension building. There were only a few calls for RC Colas, Dr. Peppers, and Hires root beer. The real festivities would begin after the fight. Then even the old Christian ladies who taught their children and tried themselves to practice turning the other cheek would buy soft drinks. And if the Brown Bombers' victory was particularly bloody, or a particularly bloody one, they would order peanut patties and Baby Ruths also. Bailey and I laid coins on the top of the cash register. Uncle Willie didn't allow us to ring up sales during a fight. It was too noisy and might shake up the atmosphere. When the gong rang out for the next round, we pushed through the near sacred quiet to the herd of children outside. Okay, I feel like there's a lot going on in just those two. So talk, what do you notice in those? And I think it's starting to get that sound stuff you were asking
Yeah,
about.
it's making sense now.
Yeah. Okay, what do you notice? Talk to each other.
Kind of just like it's like the atmosphere, it just explains it more, and the behavior of people, like Christian ladies, who end up buying drinks.
It made me happy. Like, I just need it. Gator.
And then as far as that sounds, it's just like there's like quiet, like just shows you how opposite excites them.
And I'm not quite sure why
My mom thinks so.
stood out.
Even if it's not here, they
Actually have it as that. But now
no, it's gonna be like sales, like it's just like, you know, just for the vibe.
Okay, what do you guys notice? Sorry, I was playing with my toys. Yes. What do you guys notice in here? What are you noticing about the sound, Autumn?
Okay, so like, the sound is really basically just like they all are so invested in this fight and they all wanna hear it, so like, there's so many of them, they have to be super quiet to hear, they're super invested in this. But when something like goes super great, they're so excited at the same time, they have to, you know, like let out like a, heck yeah, we're so hyped about this, you know? And like,
Yeah.
it just shows kind of like how this, like basically the whole piece has been saying, how the fight is more than a fight, it's like, it's not just the fight, like it's the meaning and everything that has behind it. And so they kind of like, once again, like, just saying it's like the reverence of the atmosphere and like how like sacred this event is.
Totally, right? So again, kind of cashing in on that, some of that Christianity stuff, the sacredness of this, definitely that Christ figure. And then, like you said, this is a huge event. I mean, they call them herd of children outside, right? You've got everyone crammed in there. And it would be very loud. And even like the radio is very loud, but they don't even use the cash register, right? Because that would be too much sound and the sound waves might disrupt like the whole environment, right? So they just put the coins on top and then like slowly back out, right? And they get excited, but everyone's like, ugh! Like, but the sound imagery is definitely, like she's capitalizing on that side of the imagery, right? Because there's 5 senses, but sound is a big one because you would feel that, like if you were all listening to a radio. I remember on road trips, we fought like the whole way until my parents, the Harry Potter books came out on like tape, and we would put those in like the radio, or I think eventually we got like CDs for them, which was, you know, state-of-the-art technology. Anyway, but we would listen to them, and we'd be listening, and like someone would start saying something like, listening, right? And so like, but we were all crowded in the front of like my grandparents' motorhome. Even though it was huge, and we were supposed to spread out, but we were all right there listening, and if anyone made a noise, it was like, shut up, right? And so you get kind of that saying like, we're trying to hear like this thing, and so the sound imagery being brought out really creates that room for us. We're there with them, right? And even when the radio comes on, it's not like, and the radio turned on, it's just like all of a sudden the radio's talking, just like it would be if we were sitting there listening. So she's really creating that scene. Anything else that you guys noticed in these couple paragraphs? Someone in my last class pointed out, which I thought was kind of funny, that the old Christian ladies taught their kids, oh, turn the cheek, and yet they're listening to this fight, and when do they celebrate? If it's particularly bloody, they celebrate harder, right? Which is kind of, it's like both funny and ironic.
Something I just kind of took from that is like, this like even adds to the unity of what's going on, because it's like, no matter even like the religion, what you believe, like, they all believe in their like people.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it's funny, and it also shows that this is, again, more than a fight, because these ladies, normally if kids were just duking it out, we'd be like, hey, what the crap are you doing? We don't hit people. But this isn't, it isn't a fight, right? Instead, it's something else that's more symbolic, so like, they celebrate harder the better his win is, because they're looking kind of beyond the fight and what it symbolically represents. So, I don't know, I like this image of these Christian ladies who are like, yeah, who would normally be like, that's not very nice, little Johnny, or whatever. Okay, maybe I'm just crazy. Okay. He's got Lewis against the ropes, and now it's a left to the body and a right to the ribs, another right to the body. It looks like it was low. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the referee is signaling, but the contender keeps raining the blows on Lewis. It's another to the body, and it looks like Lewis is going down. My race groaned. It was our people falling. It was another lynching, yet another black man hanging on a tree. One more woman, ambushed and raped, a black boy whipped and maimed. It was hounds on the trail of a man running through slimy swamps. It was a white woman slapping her maid for being forgetful. The men in the store stood away from the walls and at attention. Women greedily clutched the babes on their laps, while on the porch the shufflings and smiles flirtings, and pinchings of a few minutes before we're gone. This might be the end of the world. If Joe lost, we were back in slavery and beyond hell. It would all be true. The accusations that we were lower types of human beings, only a little higher than apes. True that we were stupid and ugly and lazy and dirty and unlucky, and worst of all, that God himself hated us and ordained us to be hewers of woods and drawers of water, forever and ever, world without end. We didn't breathe, we didn't hope, we waited. Get talk to each other about what you notice. It's so fun, you guys talk to actual humans. Go.
Honestly, these paragraphs are really just like the cool. Because I feel like she's just making people pathetic here and making her culturally butter.
Yeah, I
I just don't really agree with this and losing a fight or
Totally, yeah. Paragraph is so powerful. Saying like, whoa, like this is it. Like the whole time's kind of been alluding at this fight. It's
like I get
it's more of a
the points
threat. This
here
shows
and the purpose she's
how
trying to make,
devastating truly
but I feel like just using these crazy
it just
analogies
finally
doesn't
explains everything.
point
You know,
across
so
very well.
quickly like describes it.
And I think it just turns me
Okay, it's
against.
probably something that's like and this is like, hey, like it can
No, it's not trying too hard, it's just like really illogical.
Everything by giving this little detail.
And she also has a few other hypotheses that she makes through GSA that she just backs up it. And so that's just, I don't like this essay.
Alright, what do you guys notice going on here that we should take note of? Yes, Wes?
So, like in the My Race Grown paragraph, it's kind of like all the people listening to the radio are kind of remembering like what happened to their race and the whole thing with slavery. Because I'm kind of imagining the story is set like after slavery is ended, but like the feelings like towards Negroes from whites are kind of still there.
Yeah.
And so they're remembering all of this, and it's kind of like it's like a larger war going on, not just this boxing match, but it's like actual. It's just bringing back a lot of terrible memories to them of otherwise being Negroes.
Yeah. So definitely, this is during the time of segregation, so kind of the Reconstruction era where slavery is ended, and yet how are they still treated in real life? Not much better, right? The fact that they note that the radio person is saying ladies and gentlemen, whereas like we wouldn't even pay attention, right? It's just like something we hear people say as like a way of greeting, and yet they're like, they don't even know that they're addressing us like that. Yeah.
I think in a way that they're kind of like exacerbating the situation.
Okay.
And like making it worse than it needs to be. Like a fight shouldn't mean like their injustice, like their racial injustice.
They're definitely, yeah, capitalizing on how bad that is. Did you want to add to that?
I don't know, I was just thinking like, judging by the time period of the fight, I was thinking like, well, it took a lot for this fight to happen. It's not just an everyday event. That's why so many people are paying attention to it.
Totally, right?
That's why
Like,
there's a lot of like these analogies going on.
yeah, the fact that like a black man can fight a white man is pretty huge, right? And it's not something that they usually would allow, and so, so that might be why they're exaggerating a little. Did you want to add to that, Hannah?
Yeah, it's like, to go along with that is we didn't breathe, we didn't hope, we waited. Like, it's not just a fight, it's everybody collectively as a whole. That's why they're
Yeah. And you might think that they're exaggerating this a ton, but how much control do these people have over what is happening to them? None, right? And people are saying all the time, we're better than you. People used to say in slavery, like we saw that in Frederick Douglass's narrative, like, you guys are happier not knowing how to read, because that will just confuse you. You'll just be like, you just are less than us, right? And so like anything that they can do that proves that they're better, or proves that at least they're human is huge. And so yes, this does seem exaggerated, but for someone who doesn't have control in their life, it would be a huge like representative victory for them if something were to win. And so maybe, you know, we don't understand it today because hopefully people don't feel this way still where they have to like prove their humanity. But that's how they're viewing this fight, is at least it's some sort of short representation that we are in fact worthy of being called human.
And something I thought was like really powerful that the author chooses to do is like when it's our people failing, and then right after that, the author goes into like giving specific examples, like saying like a boy being whipped, like being hanged, like all these terrible things that have happened, and it's saying this fight means all this to us. And like the whole time it's been like kind of alluding to that meaning.
Yeah.
But this time it's giving those specific examples, and it really kind of like evokes this emotional response, because it's like these are all these terrible things that have happened, and it's all riding on this fight. It really shows why it's so important to them, and like the past and history that they've had.
Totally. And it's also important to remember in literature, you're gonna be more symbolic in things and attribute more meaning than maybe you would in real life. But think about your own real life. Think about think about like any hang up you have or thing that you think you're not good at. So I was like never good at sports, and so anytime I failed at like something in sports, it was like, this proves that I am not good at like being athletic or blah 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 blah, right? And like something like you could think about a particular game, right? And maybe it wasn't that game itself, but it was all like this litany of things before, and then that was just like the straw that broke the camel's back, and you're like, that shows that I suck at this and I should never, like, it means more than it really would looking from the outside. And so, yes, this may seem over-exaggerated, this one instance, but I think symbolically what she's showing is that, you know, any little victory would help to prove that, like, they are human. And the reason it's such a big deal is because of all the terrible things that have happened before this to her race. And I think it's important, maybe I don't really have an opinion on it, but my race groaned, right? That's a weird phrase, because who are the people sitting next to her? Her family, her friends, right? Her community. And yet she uses the word race, and that's like a huge hint to her purpose right there, that this is more than a fight. It's like a symbol for racial justice in some, or the fact that like her race is human, right? So that would be like a good word to know, just that one word. Because I don't really be like, so my race when I'm talking about my family and friends, right? Like, well, my community maybe, right? But that's a good word. Anything else you noticed? Yeah.
Well, I feel like she's given no evidence that anyone else actually is racist in this entire passage so far. And so I kind of dislike the way, I think it's a little illogical, and it kind of loses credibility to me.
Okay. And that, that's fair. Especially when you pluck a passage out of a greater work, you can
Right,
get some
so
of that.
I'm sure she, earlier in the book, gave examples.
Yeah. But, I mean, maybe you're right, maybe you're like.
And I just dislike this part of the passage.
That is fair. And I think up here at like the beginning, she talks about a little bit more like Angela was telling the event, both entertains us and explains what it was like. So it's just like one example in the midst of her essay, or not her essay, her memoir. Okay. Some other things that I would just note in these passages, the short sentence structure here versus the polysyndeton here where she's using and that sentence is very, very long. Remember, polysyndeton is when you take, instead of using commas there, you put in conjunctions instead. What does that do with that long sentence? How does that make us feel? It's kind of like this barrage of things that have been heaped on her and that she feels, right? And it creates also some anxiety there when you're talking really fast and you're not pausing and you're very passionate about the thing, and then boom, boom, boom. It's like very impactful, right? The difference there. So I want to note that. Okay. He's off the ropes, ladies and gentlemen. He's moving towards the center of the ring. There was no time to be relieved. The worst might still happen. And now it looks like Joe is mad. He's caught Canara with a left hook to the head and a right to the head. It's a left jab to the body and another left to the head. There's a left cross and a right to the head. The contender's right eye is bleeding and he can't seem to keep his block up. Lewis is penetrating every block. The referee is moving in, but Lewis sends a left to the body and it's an uppercut to the chin, and the contender is dropping. He's on the canvas, ladies and gentlemen. Baby slid to the floor and women stood up and then leaned toward the radio. Here's the referee. He's counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is the contender trying to get up? All the men in the store shouted, no! 8, 9, 10. There were a few sounds from the audience, but they seemed to be holding themselves in against tremendous pressure. The fight is all over, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get the microphone over to the referee. Here he is. He's got the Brown Bombers' hand. He's holding it up. Here he is. Then the voice, husky and familiar, came to wash over us. The winner and still heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis. Champion of the world. A black boy, some black mother's son. He was the strongest man in the world. People drank Coca-Colas like Ambrosia and ate candy bars like Christmas. Some of the men went behind the store and poured white lightning into their soft drink bottles, and a few of the bigger boys followed them. Those who were not chased away came back, blowing their breath in front of them like frog smokers. It would take an hour or more before the people would leave the store and head for home. Those who lived too far had made arrangements to stay in town. It wouldn't be fit for a black man and his family to be caught on a lonely country road on a night when Joe Louis had proved that we were the strongest people in the world. Okay, we don't have a ton of time, but what do you notice, we can just talk as a class, in this last paragraph that would be important to note for her purpose and the choices she makes? What do you notice about that oh yeah, go ahead.
I noticed that she used ambrosia and Christmas in the same sentence.
Why is that weird?
Because ambrosia is like something in Greek culture that the gods drank or ate, and Christmas is a Christian thing.
Okay. Yeah, why do you think she does that?
I think to show that the black people have their own culture, which is distinct from either. I'm not sure.
It's like a celebration in any culture, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but I noticed that too, but I think I would have to do more thinking to think about why particular, but I like that you noticed that. Did you have your hand up?
Oh,
Yeah.
I was just saying, like, the emphasis on that shows how, like, excited everybody was, because especially for those two events, like, it's big, and it's kinda, it's not odd, but it's like, it kinda just shows context as to, like, what they're celebrating with. Like, Coca-Cola and candy bars, like, not exactly, like, the most exotic thing, but, like, really simple.
Yeah, but they're excited, it's a big celebration.
Yes.
And they celebrate big as if it were Christmas, or like ambrosia is the nectar of the gods, right? So it's much fancier symbolically than what it is. Yes.
I just think this is interesting because like now in like modern day, like the black community kind of just like dominates sports, and like back then, I think it was like a really big deal. As of right now, it's like kind of normal, but it's just interesting because this is like probably one of like the first black victories in sports.
One of the first interracial fights, maybe even.
Yeah.
I don't know my history, so I can't say that for sure, but definitely much more impactful back then than today. It would just be like two contenders, and you'd be like, great, but here it's symbolic. That last line, so even though they win, even though they're celebrating great, what is kind of ironic about the situation? Yeah.
Is that even though they're so excited that like they prove themselves like almost like equal, they still have to come back to reality and the fact that there's still racism in the world.
Totally. So even though they're the champion of the world, nothing's changed, right? Nothing has changed. They still have to watch their back, and that's sad. Even though they're the strongest people in the world, they still have to worry about their lives all the time. And so even though this is this symbolic victory, what does that change in reality? Nothing. And maybe that's some of the feelings you were feeling, like this feels exaggerated, but she exaggerates it to show so much to show that like even though like they were so excited and they feel like it should mean something, it just really doesn't at the end of the day, and that's sad, right? That even though that these show that they're just as human and stronger, nothing in reality has changed. And that, again, that would be a huge thing that you want to know for purpose and choices they're making. So things you could talk about. You could talk about just the build-up, right? She creates this feeling that this is larger than life by showing how crowded it is, the reverence, the Christian imagery you could talk about. You could talk about how she sets it up as like a race issue by showing that she uses a dialect, the word choice, and then you could also talk about the ironic twist at the end that even though she builds it up as this huge thing, in the end it doesn't mean much at all. Okay. I want to talk about your narrative really quick. So this week, you need to come up with your first draft, but before you do that, I want you to fill out this brainstorming sheet. The better you think, the better your narrative is going to be. If you do enough thinking, you could bust out the first draft in 2 hours, right? You want to think about some of the narratives we've read and choices that they've made. Some of them have chosen an image to center their narrative on, like the old man looks at the photo and then he evaluates his whole life based on his change of this photo, like the before and after that moment. Superman and Me picks like that Superman analogy and runs with that the whole time, right? Both of these stories we had today have kind of the ironic twist at the end where they set it up and then at the end it falls short, or it's like, oh, that was actually not what it seemed. So think about a story from your own life. You're gonna choose a photo. You could base your story very loosely on that photo, right? It could just inspire another idea, but that's a good starting place. And then you wanna think about what imagery are you gonna put in there? What diction? How are you gonna accomplish your purpose? What does your audience need to feel in order to be moved by your piece and experience what you want for them? Okay, so you're gonna fill out this paper, and then you're gonna write your narrative. You're gonna be very aware of what you're doing to manipulate people's emotions, what you're portraying about yourself. Do you portray yourself as a young child telling the story, because that creates the innocence you need to show the loss of innocence in this experience that you have. But this is gonna be like the best thing you've ever written, because now you're rhetorical geniuses. I'm also gonna pass out to you your, you're gonna write a timed write. I'm gonna talk all about that on the video that you'll watch tomorrow. It's not due till the 25th, but I want you to handwrite it, because when you do the exam, it will be handwritten. And if you practice typing and then you have to handwrite, you'll be like, I don't have enough time. So you're gonna handwrite it legibly, because if they can't read it, they also can't give you a good score. So I'm gonna pass these out to you. It's not due the 25th. This week, you're gonna be focusing just on that narrative. So you're doing photo narrative all week. Any questions? Just grab one as you walk out. I'll find it easiest. Thank you all. You're lovely. I like your Easter egg. I hope that works for you. Aerodynamic. Thank you. Have a good day. You got my favorite.
Oh,
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. You had a great conference today. There you go, there's. Thank you. Yeah, if I wait till the video from class tomorrow, then it will explain that more. But I just want to see you guys tomorrow. That 65 minutes is not big enough for like a whole big class that actually has things to say.
Everybody says like the difference between first and second of just like the kids being.
Yeah.